Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Young Voices of the North podcast. I am Namirembe, and today I'm joined by Eniola and Chisomebi. And today we will be discussing our experiences as Black girls living in the North and also just our experience in general.
So how about we start by talking about our experiences living in like a different environment than what our parents grew up in. Like, for example, I'm pretty sure all of our parents are immigrants. So where they grew up is way different than how we get to grow up. I know that I get a lot more privileges and stuff than my parents had when they were growing up, and like how that kind of translates to how I live today. Like, this whole episode is mostly about misogyny and living as a Black girl in Canada. So I'm going to start with my family experience. I feel like in my family personally, there isn't that much misogyny. I know I'm like really lucky because I'm sure a lot of people can't really say the same. But like, my dad is actually, he's not very misogynistic.
Yeah, and that's something that isn't always very common. Like, I know with myself, there are certain values in my family, like, a girl's role versus a guy's role that's kind of like emphasized for certain things, and that can be very frustrating. But at the same time, it's like they don't get it where I'm coming from, and I don't really get where they're coming from, because like as someone who grew up like in Canada, Northern Manitoba my whole life, we kind of talk about like eliminate gender roles. It's kind of like everything should be shared, which I agree with. But then culturally, like at home, it's kind of like you kind of see that like the women tend to do certain roles and the men tend to do others, and sometimes women even do some of the men's, like, quote unquote men's roles, but you never really see the men going back and maybe doing some of the quote unquote women's roles.
Yeah, like I feel like I'm just speaking out of place here. But pretty much it's like sometimes I deleted TikTok like pretty much yesterday for other reasons, mostly because I don't want to waste my time, scrolling. But like sometimes you'll just be scrolling and then you'll just see a video of like a woman who wants to go take a shower or something. And then she's like to her husband, "Can you babysit your own kids for a second so that I can have 20 minutes to go take a shower?" And you're just like, they're his kids too. You should be able to shower when you want to. And then like you think that that makes sense. But then you go to the comments and you see men there being like, how dare she impede on her husband's free time by making him watch his own kids? And you're just like, whose thought process is that? Like,
people, when they're typing these things, they don't really understand the impact it has on people. Because when you go and say these things like, this is a woman's role, and like, it can really, like, emotionally and like psychologically even, because like this is kind of off topic, but like in these kinds of like situations, you see women who like willingly accept that role as like a woman's place and stuff like that. And like when you think about it, like me, when I think about it, it's not okay, but it has been forced on them over and over and over, and then they're like, bro, this is my fate. Like, this is all I can do. And so they just accept it. They're just like, they allow themselves to be oppressed, kind of. And like, it's not ideal. It's really not good.
yeah. And another thing is like a lot of people who are in better situations, they kind of don't appreciate what they have. And when they see other women or other people in these negative situations, they kind of just look at it and be like, then just leave or something like that. Like, I know I'm like really privileged, and I'm just going to say that again in this video. Because like sometimes I need to like take a step back and be like, I'm kind of privileged right now. Maybe I need to see this from a different perspective. Because sometimes, I'm not saying me personally, but sometimes you see like other people like judging people for things and not really thinking about the human being behind it.
Yes.
You see people with drug addictions or like alcohol and other things like that, and you're kind of just judging them and being like, well, then simply don't drink. Simply, why did you take drugs in the first place? And like, you need to understand where they're coming from. And that's the same thing when it comes to women being oppressed. It's like, you may think that it's as easy as just simply not listening to the men around you. But when you've been born into that role and it's been the role you've been playing your entire life, it's not just that easy to escape, you know?
And there's also the matter of like domestic violence and how in some places it's actually encouraged.
Yeah.
Because when like the woman doesn't listen to the man, they're like being disrespectful and they have to be punished and stuff. Because there's like a whole like stigma that like women are made to like please men. So where we come from, where it's more progressive, we don't really like understand, like going back to what Eniola said, we don't really understand what people are going through unless we put ourselves in their shoes. So people who go through these things, like, we don't really understand what they're going through. They can't just leave. They can't just, because even there are like arranged marriages and stuff like that. The women, most times they don't have a say in all these things. And when they don't have a say, there's not much they could do about it. They can just like,
yeah. And one thing I also want to add is that, just to clarify, because I know that this is like a huge problem going around these days, like arranged marriages versus forced marriages. That's like a huge other thing. Like, forced marriages are not under any circumstances all right in any way. Arranged marriages, though, are the ones where like you get set up pretty much.
Yeah, and I just want to say, like, overall, like, about this topic of kind of like women feeling stuck of where they are, I feel like we see that a lot culturally too. Like, where we see certain like relatives kind of tolerate certain behaviors from their husbands, but we see it as like appalling, right? Because like we're here in Canada and it's kind of like those things aren't accepted, whereas we see like some of like the people from the older generations and they're kind of like accepting these things. But I feel like it's important that we don't always like kind of like blame them, like, you can kind of like leave now, right? Because it's all they know, it's all they were taught, and they probably don't even realize that some of these things that they're going through like isn't okay, and that they should leave. Like, that's what we would say, but they don't really think of it that way. And also, I also feel like because there's such a stigma on like divorce too and separation, like within like the African community and stuff, and no one really wants to go down that path out of fear of being like, oh, what's the word, kind of like outcast as well.
And like women who have like grown up in this way, who are like taught this way, they kind of like transfer what they have grown up with, what they know, on their like children, mostly like their daughters. So like to be a certain way, to like act a certain way, to be like docile and like not talk back,
and
you know,
never,
stuff like that.
And like they're always so focused on creating wives. They're always so focused on turning their daughters into wives,
than actual
but
people.
They're never ever concerned with turning their sons into husbands.
Yes,
that's true. I always feel like there's such a thing where it's like, especially like, have you noticed like a lot of couples have like quite a big age gap, right?
Yes.
And so the husband, like, anytime like he kind of talks about his life, he's like, yeah, I did like all these years of education and I traveled here, there, and everywhere, and I settled down when I was like 40, right? But like if a woman said those same things, they'll be like, well, that's why you're single, right? And I also feel like something that I've noticed is like, you see like a lot of the uncles, there are a lot of single uncles, right? But no one kind of blames them for that. But whenever there's like a woman and she's kind of like approaching 30 and everyone's like, you know, you should find someone because like, you know, your time to have kids is almost done. And it's kind of like, but there's so much more to her than like being a mom. Like, obviously there's nothing wrong with wanting to be a mom. Like, if that's what you want to do, like, that's amazing. But at the same time, you have to acknowledge that some people, like, maybe they kind of want to do that same thing. They want to do their years of education and maybe travel a whole bunch before they're ready to be settled down, and that's okay, you know?
Yeah.
And like when people have kids, like almost automatically their whole life kind of becomes like around that kid. So like to raise that child and like doing all that, it kind of hinders you in what like you can achieve in your life.
Yeah.
Like some people, when they like some women that like I know, they've had kids and like they have to put their whole education aside, they have to put everything aside so they can like take care of that kid, and that like hinders your own growth because there's so much you could have been. Like there's nothing, once again, there's nothing wrong with you wanting to be a mother, but there are people who aren't ready for that. There are people who like they aren't financially, emotionally. That's why you get all these like neglected children.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like children who like don't want to be with their parents anymore because these children were like forced like by society. Just like these women had these kids not because they wanted to have kids, just to ease the people around them.
Yeah.
Because like once again, at some point they're gonna be like, oh, like your time to have a kid is gonna run out.
It's kind of like they all kind of pester
Yeah.
the woman
Yeah.
about it, and they make it seem like her life hasn't been fulfilled.
Yes. They make it seem like women's roles are like to be wives and mothers and nothing more.
And the thing is, that was like the rampant thought process for like the past thousands of years.
Yes, thousands.
So that is why like we still have that going on today.
Yeah.
It's not like we expected to wake up one day and have all these thought processes gone. But the thing is that we should start thinking about, you know, changing the future. Just because we've had this thought process for the past thousands of years doesn't mean they have to keep going on. And one other thing I wanted to add is that sometimes women don't want to have kids because they know that they're like married to someone, and they know that their partner won't help them like at all. Like I heard this really devastating story of this woman who did not want kids like at all. And then her husband like pressured her, pestered her, all of that. And then she got pregnant, and then she got kids. And then the husband was like, oh, well, now I'm not attracted to her anymore. And like people are just like, wow, you're a terrible person. But they're like, oh, I can't really help it. I'm just not attracted to them anymore, you know, stretch marks and stuff. And like, you're just like, you're the one who's at fault here.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of men want kids for like social status or something like that.
Yeah.
But they don't want to like actually do the grunt work of like being a parent. Like being a parent is hard. It's a lot of work, a lot of sacrifice, and a lot of people aren't really willing to do that, and then it just falls onto the mothers, which isn't fair.
Like, there's this thing that it's like, all children deserve parents, but not all parents deserve to have children. So like when you think about that, and you think about how like there are absent fathers, and it's way more common for like fathers to be absent than mothers, because you know obviously it's the mother, and you know, so like there's some people who like do not deserve these kids, but they have them, and then these kids grow up to like very like toxic environments, and like it could really like hinder them, not just like the parent, even the kid too.
So moving on, we're going to talk about kind of our experience being Black in the North, and like specifically Black girls. So has it ever happened to you guys where you're just automatically shipped with the other Black guy?
Oh my
wait,
God,
shipping
bro.
is like a whole other thing, really.
Bro.
And it's so weird. People like you could literally just make eye contact with them briefly because like, I don't know, that just happens, and everyone's like, oh, you like him, don't you? And you're like, where did that come from?
It's also like really funny how like between the three of us, most of this shipping is going on within us and each other's like brothers.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Yeah, because we live in like a small town where it's pretty much only us and our brothers.
Yeah.
So like it's
yeah,
It's
like
really
I've been shipped with Eniola's brother, and
I wouldn't say shipped, I'd say like people
speculated.
Yes, people speculated that your brother liked me.
Oh, people speculated so that my brother liked you.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Shipping though, like, if you're not being shipped with the other black guy, because I was able to avoid all that, because pretty much throughout like my whole time living here, like my brother has been the only other black guy,
and people kind of already knew you were related.
Yeah, so I was able to avoid that. But like, I feel like it's even worse now, because now people aren't shipping me with any black guys, but they're always finding the ugliest people to ship me with for some reason.
Oh my god.
And oh my goodness, this is like a whole other thing. This one time, I'm not going to name drop, but this one time I was talking to one of my friends, quotation marks, and like, I was, as a joke, this was like completely a joke, I was like, oh, I like this one blonde-haired, blue-eyed person, and then they were like, oh, someone like that would never like you unless they had like some sort of fetish or something.
No way.
They said that to my face.
Oh my god.
Yeah. And like, I was just like shocked. I was just dumbfounded. But then this is going to be another topic we're going to have to talk about in this episode. I kind of just laughed it off. I was like, ha 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 ha.
I feel like that's all you can do though. Like literally, I used to always be like, yeah, I gotta like say something, like fight back, and I've just kind of reached a point now where I'm like, it's not even worth it.
Yeah, it's not even worth it.
Because they just don't get how what they said was so like offensive and rude.
Like all the like watermelon muncher and like fried chicken. It's not funny.
It's
guys.
not.
I want to tell you, it's really not funny,
and it's so overused too. And
if you think it's funny, just know you're not funny.
Yeah, and I feel like like obviously I don't really know. Like I have a pretty small friend group, or like close knit, I should say. But like, I feel like I see this a lot within male friend groups. Like obviously, lots of girls racist too, but like you see it a lot more. The guys at least are more open about it, about like they're kind of like saying the racist jokes, but then they feel validated because there's always like another black guy in their friend group who doesn't really say anything, and I feel like it's because he doesn't really know what to do with it either. But at the same time, it's kind of frustrating that he stays in that friend group, because then these guys think it's okay.
Like it's like, I'm just gonna say this because I know in big cities this also happens a lot, where you're kind of like pressured to be part of a certain friend group, but I feel like here it's like way more pressure, because there are so few people. Like our school has like 300 people, right? At our high school.
It's probably like 400, but
400?
I think so.
We have like 400 people in our school. And out of those 400 people, there's only like a select few people who you have classes with. And especially since you're not in French immersion, but me and Nami, we are in French immersion. So like those other people in French immersion, they're pretty much your only friends that you have most of your classes with. So you're kind of like pressured to be friends with them.
That's true.
And like, even if they're racist and things to you, like, it's either you're friends with us or you're friends with no one, pretty much.
Yeah. And I've actually heard that before, where someone's like, well, it's like, who else am I supposed to be friends with if I'm not friends with these people? Like, I guess I'd say I count myself really lucky that I have like people who don't say things like that.
Yeah.
But it's kind of sad to see that people feel the need that these are like their only options for friends, right? Like, if that's the one thing that's kind of like hard about living in a place like where we live, where it's not very diverse and stuff like that. So it's kind of like you have like a select amount of people you can be friends with, you know, who happen to like the same things as you and be the same age as you. It's kind of like,
like literally, how am I even going to say this? You just think and you're like, are these people really my friends? Because they're doing all these things, and you're like, do these people even like me? Do these people even like think I'm a human being at this point? Because like, how can you say that to someone and then just laugh it off? Like, honestly.
And then when you stand up for yourself, you're just seen as like sensitive.
They're all like, it's really not that deep. Like, you shouldn't Like, these things should not really affect you as it does, but it really actually does, because they don't know the impact these things have, because like
they never had to experience it.
Exactly. Yeah, but I just wish people could understand like the significance that these so-called jokes hold. And I feel like, okay, I'm not sure about you guys, but like, because like we see things like this like so often and hear things like this so often, do you ever just kind of like long for more like Black friends? Like, I feel like I've always kind of did, like, obviously, like, I don't care what race you are, I'll be friends with anyone, but sometimes it's something you long for just because you know they'll understand where you're coming from. It's kind of like more like a connection thing. Like with you guys, like, even though you're like younger than me, so typically like we won't necessarily be friends, right, because of age difference, but I still feel like connected to you. And I don't really see like that difference.
You know? Like we can talk about these topics without there being that one judgmental person in the corner being like, guys, it isn't that bad, you're just over dramatic. Like, and the other thing is, another thing is that if you do decide to like hang out with, like, if you decided one day that you wanted to have an all Black friend group or something like that, then you'd immediately be like targeted, and people would immediately look at you and be like, wow, I can see you only like hanging out with Black people. Like, stuff like that. So like, I try not to like be like that, but like sometimes you have no choice but to be racially conscious like that. Because if you just go and you just decide, I only want to hang out with these certain people, people are just going to think that you're the racist one.
Exactly. But I feel like there's a difference, because racist people would say, I don't want to hang out with these other people because like I think they're smelly and ugly or things like that, right? Whereas we're more like, well, we want to hang out with people like us because they understand us. They understand the hardships we go through. And you also don't have to like think like, oh, one day like these people could just like say something out of the blue, which has happened to I think all of us, right? Where you think someone's cool, and all of a sudden they say the N-word or they make a race joke to you, and you're like, what the heck?
And like the one friend that I mentioned earlier who said that whole thing about guys and stuff, like up to that point, like at first when we weren't really like that close friends, they were a chill person. But the moment they started to feel comfortable, they started pulling out all these random stuff. Like, sometimes you have to actually be friends with someone before they start showing their true colors.
Yeah. It's always once they get comfortable. Like, when you don't really know them, then it's like, you know, they still seem chill, whatever. Then the minute they get comfortable, they start whipping out race jokes and slurs. Like, once in, I think it was 10th grade, there's this one person, and like, I didn't really know them that well, whatever. We just snapped each other. And then we started to talk a little bit. And all of a sudden, like, they did like that N-word substitute thing where they were like, knitter. And I was like, that's not funny. And I was like, why would you even want to be friends with me if you don't respect my people? And that person was like, oh, I actually respect your people a lot. And I'm like, okay. And it happens every time. They just get comfortable and they feel like they can say that, like, as if like we'll defend their actions or something. Like, we're not gonna do that. Weird.
And like the thing about the N-word and stuff like that, when people say these things, there's really nothing we can do about it. Because like, we're not gonna fight you just because you say that word. Like, all we can do is just accept it. But like, these things, they actually really hurt. And like, if you think about it, it's not okay, because if the roles were reversed, how would you feel? That's what you need to think. Put yourself in other people's shoes.
And the thing is, they somehow like struggle to put themselves in other people's shoes. Because like, they've never experienced anything that can even be like similar to that. So then even when you're trying to tell them, put yourself in my shoes, they're still like, oh, well, I wouldn't really care. So like, they like lack, it's not that they lack empathy. They do lack empathy, but they lack the ability to have empathy.
Also, I want to kind of talk about how like black guys in these like toxic friend groups, when they just accept stuff like these, they don't really like, they're not really, I wouldn't say they're not against it, but they just don't fight back. And that is also kind of equal to like why like most black guys I know here are like really really popular. And it's kind of, and you see them with the like worst friend groups. You see them with people who are like kind of openly racist, who like say these things without even regard to like, why would these person say this? Why would you hang out with that person?
But it's again about like that pressure thing. Like we live in a small place.
Yeah,
and like your friends are really limited, and like you can understand like if they want to be friends with other guys, right? Because it's like a connection thing. But it's like kind of sad to see that they're willing to like take that on for the sake of having like, you know, other like male friends, maybe.
Because once again, it's like, it's either you're friends with these people or you have no friends.
Yeah, and it's a choice that no one should have to make. Like, it's so sad to see.
And like, you try not to blame them because you do understand that, because we're pretty much in the same situation. But like, at the same time, you're kind of just, you just feel some sort of way about how they're treating this whole thing.
Yeah.
Because like, when they are letting racist jokes slide and just laughing it off and stuff,
it empowers those people who are making those jokes.
And that's why they call us sensitive when we say something about it.
Like, for you, it may just be a joke that someone's just telling you as like, you know, a joke, but then they're going to walk up to me and say the same thing, and like, you're okay with that?
Yeah.
Like, it's really not okay.
Yeah.
When you think about it.
And I feel like this is why it's like so important that we have like these conversations. I wish we kind of had them more in schools. Like, I get for us, like, we don't necessarily like just have like the teachers, because like, you know, they're not black, so like obviously they can't speak for us, right? But if we could get like, I don't know, like speakers or something to kind of have these conversations, but like starting at a young age too, because like that's what other people get confused with. They're like, oh well, they're kind of too young to like really know. It's like, no, but they learn these things from like the people around them, like the adults around them, and it's not okay because then it carries through. And it's not fair that we have to endure like that kind of trauma like our entire lives. Like, and you know that the racism like that they have is being taught to them, because like I remember, like, I know it's kind of weird to think like back in daycare, but usually these things kind of stick with me. I don't remember anyone, like any of the other kids, being racist to me, but it started in like maybe like first or second grade, and then suddenly it started, and every single year I can note at least one experience where someone has like said something or done something.
And this is also touching back to social media with the rise of like technology and stuff like that. People have more access to all these, like, little children have more access to like the internet and stuff like that. They're exposed to things they really shouldn't be.
And like, another thing is, I used to compare myself to people on the internet, but now I just don't anymore. I just decided that you should never be comparing yourself to people on the internet, because you may be thinking, oh, I'm not that racist. Have you seen this one person on the internet who's saying these things? Like, don't compare yourself to them. You should hold yourself to a higher standard. Like, standards exist. You should not be holding yourself to the same standard as some random person is holding themselves on the internet.
And I feel like if you have to compare yourself to someone else to prove you're not that racist, there's a problem there already.
Yeah. And like, it's not only about racism, it's also other things. Don't go on the internet looking for any sort of advice. The only advice you should be getting on the internet is what skincare to buy or something like that. Don't like be going on the internet for moral advice or like life advice or anything like that. Because there will always be someone worse than you on the internet. So don't be thinking, at least I'm not this person.
I feel like deep down though, people who do that know what they're doing is wrong. Like, but they're just trying to like, I don't know, like, I don't want to say like validate themselves, something like that, where they know what they're doing is wrong, but they don't really want to admit that what they're doing is wrong, especially with like the way like things like racism are viewed now. Like it's really bad. So people try to walk their way around it. Like they beat around the bush to figure out other ways of like proving they're not racist per se, because that has such a negative connotation
joking
with it. But they'll call it, oh, dark humor.
Yeah.
That's what they call it. And dark humor isn't even funny. It's just like, it's either like racist or like ableist or homophobic or transphobic or misogynistic. It's not funny. And the fact that if you think you need to like ridicule specific groups of people to be funny, you're just not funny.
Yeah. Like jokes shouldn't be like that.
Jokes that like impact other people like negatively, like emotionally and stuff like that, that should not really be made. Like there are people who find that funny, but like no, like actually think about who you're affecting when you say these things, you know?
Yeah, like
because there might be people who are like actually like on the brink of like doing something to harm themselves, and then when they like see these things, they're like, oh my god, nobody cares. Like when no one's speaking up about these things, like they're like, what's even the purpose? And like it can really like push people over the edge to like really harm themselves and like do stuff.
Yeah, like this is just a message to our viewers. You should always be thinking about the person behind the screen or even in person. Like I was talking about this one quotation mark friend that like keeps saying like these racist, like demeaning things. Like think about the person behind the face. I may be smiling and just laughing it off, but like actually think about how you're affecting the person you're speaking to, or when you're making those comments, those negative comments on other people's social media posts, like think about,
oh my god,
think about the person, think about their feelings. Like you're not the only human with feelings on this planet. Have some empathy.
Because it's those very people too, where if you call them out on it, then they'll be the ones crying, going, oh, you're being so mean to me. Like, I feel like we live in a time where it's more offensive to call someone racist than to be racist.
Yeah, and the thing is, I feel like in this day and age, people are so focused on their own feelings and never the feelings of others. Like, mental health has been such a huge thing these days, and I'm so happy about that. People are finally starting to focus on their mental health. But while you're focusing on your own mental health, think about the mental health of other people around you. Like, you're not the only person with mental health, you know?
Yeah.
Because you never know what someone is going through. What you might see, like, as just like a wayward joke, could be something that, like, they think about for the rest of their lives. It could be something that could, like, really impact them and how they like view their life. And it might just be something like fleeting, something you don't really think much about, but it could really affect the person you're saying that to.
Okay, so I think we kind of wrapped up everything. We did more so kind of talk about everything between like racism and misogyny. As you can tell, there's a lot to unpack. These are very good conversations, and I'm glad we have each other to kind of support each other through these kinds of talks. So thank you very much, Eniola and Chisomebi, for being here today, and we will see you guys next month.